Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
It's The In Show, Australia's only show dedicated to innovation from Adelaide, Australia and across the globe.
It's David Grice and Troy Sincock on The In Show. We're talking to big people with big ideas, people who are out to change the world.
Yeah, look, I'm loving the fact that we've got the ability to just see all these people and, you know, let alone the fact that get into their world and understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. And then, you know, what they're coming up with is just astounding.
And when you look, really, they are all around us in all areas of life, in all industries, you know, really making a difference. And at Hybrid World Adelaide, July 20 to 24 at the Adelaide Convention Centre, what's great about that is all these brains come together and you really get to see the future right now.
We really do. And look, the thing is that the people that are coming, like the key speakers and so forth, you know, you've got people from NASA and, you know, all sorts of walks of life that are doing some incredible stuff. But just getting in the room with these people and hearing how they think is something that is just, I don't know, it's beyond belief. And you know, the stuff that I really enjoy is hearing how they see the future.
Yeah, isn't it amazing when you're around someone that thinks that way, how you start looking at different ways of approaching the things that you never saw possible and start going, wow, well, if I knew a person that could do this, then I could do that. And it's almost like nothing could potentially stop you.
No, absolutely. And you know, look, again, it's just incredible because we're seeing these people descend on Adelaide and imparting their knowledge and wisdom of some of the things that, you know, people aren't even thinking about yet.
Yeah, we're really lucky to have all these brains here. Now, one of them is the director of the Australian Smart Cities Consortium, Nick Faulkner. You went to Adelaide Uni to have a chat to him.
Yeah, I did. I plugged the old microphone into the iPhone and away we went. And, you know, I started by asking him what a smart city is all about.
One of the things is you've probably heard the term smart cities, and whenever anybody explains it, there's a lot of subtlety in how they explain it. We've taken a very simple approach, which is cities are full of great resources already. That's why most cities work. So we see smart cities as the best use of the technology you can find to augment the resources you've already got in the city, to make living there better, and also to make it a successful city, whether that's ease of movement or economic development.
So it's more than just the tech, is what you're saying?
It's always more than just the tech. One of the interesting things is if you go to a tech company, and I speak as someone who's worked for them, and you say, I've got this problem, they'll always sell you a solution. And some of the solutions that come out are fantastic, and occasionally you're going to end up with something which works for you now, but doesn't work for you in the future. So the approach that we've taken is look at the problems that people have. And inside any place that people live, the same sort of problems show up. How do you get the water? How do you feed people? How do they move around? How do you keep them warm? How do you keep them cool? All of these problems keep coming up time and time again. So if we look at the problems that we've got, and then we look at what the city's already doing to help it, how can we make that better? Sometimes what we're going to use is technology to analyse what's going on, to give us true understanding, then we make a better decision. I'll give you an example of that in a second. And sometimes what we do is we put new technology in the form of sensors or in the form of the traffic lights. Traffic lights are a classic technological introduction to solve the problem of increasing traffic density. It's actually one of the first smart city solutions. Putting in a traffic light, which seems kind of crazy, but that's it. That's what these things are supposed to do. They're technology that is used to augment what you have, and to think of it as being like this giant shining technopolis, that's not what we're after. So to look at a solution that worked with existing resources, there's a giant ring road around London called the M25. Absolutely huge, a little bit of a nightmare. And they had this weird problem where these traffic jams would occur out of nowhere. And what had happened was people were speeding or moving a little too fast. They'd get too close to the car in front and they'd brake. This would slow them down. The cars behind them would start arriving, and the cars leaving at the front were actually leaving slightly more slowly than the cars were arriving at the back. So this cluster of cars that were just pausing would grow, and you'd end up with a traffic jam for no reason whatsoever. Now, the solution to this is fantastic because they looked at the problem and realised it was because of those speed issues. So they didn't change the cars and they didn't actually change the road. They've got segments along the M25 where the speed limit has dropped a bit. You go into that section, you drop speed slightly, you come out, you go back up to speed. It's enough to stop these particular things from happening. It's a really good smart city solution. Analysis to get understanding, to drive decision making. Very little actual technology involved in the solution.
So how on earth did you go down the path of getting into this whole smart city thing?
That's a really good question. I have a fairly diverse background. I started off by getting a degree and went off to be a programmer. Then I went off and did winemaking for a few years, and I came back to do my PhD. And when I came back to do my PhD, I was focused on networking and distributed systems. How do you get big systems that span the world to talk to each other? When I was initially approached to look at smart cities, I was asked to be involved in the networking side of it because the essence of any improvement is measuring the important things. So it comes down to data and networking and shunting things around. That's where I started, and then the director's position became available. And having looked at this whole area, I started to realise that the network was in fact the nervous system of the city. It's what allowed us to work out if we were hurting, if we were warm, if we were cold, and it's what allowed us to direct our activities in order to try and solve these problems. So my background was effectively in a networking space, and that's where I came into it. But I've always had a great deal of interest in architecture and design and understanding how people live. In my day job of being a professor of computer science, I look at educational research a lot. And what I try to understand is student motivation. Why are they doing what they're doing? Because if I can get somebody interested in learning what we want to provide, then they will do all the heavy lifting for me. You know, you can't force people to think, but you can certainly get people engaged and involved. And then they will actually run off and they'll do all the learning. And the difficulty is actually trying to, stop them at that point. When somebody's really excited, the difficulty is actually getting them to a point where they stop and they give you the report, and then you can, do whatever you need to do with it. And this is the same thing with everything that we're doing inside the city. We're trying to make people understand, but we're also dealing with the reality that people have their own needs, they have their desires, and a big part of moving a city forward is working out how you can get people living with each other comfortably, and most of the time getting what they want, because it's not unreasonable. People want to be safe, they want to be fed, they want to be comfortable. They want to feel that they matter, they want to have something useful to do. So we focus very hard on making any form of human habitation better for the vast majority of people. There's an architect, a very famous architect, Le Corbusier, and he described a house as a machine for living. And it's one of my favourite definitions because it really explains what a house is. And for me, a city is a machine for living with other people, particularly people that you don't know. And when you start to think about it that way, the friction, the way that the parts bang up against each other, we're just trying to make it work better. But it's not a cold machine. It's something that really makes you feel like you're living the kind of life you want to live.
I love that. I just think that, often we don't really think about how we live with others. We think about how we just live, and we live in these little bubbles and those sorts of things. With doing what you're doing, so perhaps just tell us a little bit about the Smart Cities Consortium and what work you're actually up to.
The Smart Cities Consortium is built out of a university and local government and industry partners as well, and we've also got state government involvement as well now. It started from the idea that a university is full of experts, but they tend to be focused into one discipline. That's certainly how it goes. You've got schools of computer science full of computer scientists, schools of architecture full of architects. What happens when you start to look at city problems is they don't fit neatly into one bucket. What we wanted to do was to make sure that anybody who could contribute expertise to the solution of an important problem was able to do so. And so we built the consortium. And so the consortium spans all of the faculties, and we have associations with staff within the university, academics and researchers alike, because we actually have very few staff. We have a director who is me, and I have 1.4 project officers, and we're the people who are strongly associated with it. And everything else is forming groups of people to look at problems. We introduce people to the people who have the problems, and we look at how we can potentially solve those through research, how we can solve them through small projects, and hopefully build that up to a point where we can start implementing really big things. So we've done some work in wayfinding, we've done some work in green space, we're doing work in smart water, that detecting pipe failures, working out how to ameliorate the flooding that's caused when you take green space and you put houses on it. There's nowhere for it to drain, and yet the rain still comes down. How can you do that? How can you actually handle all of that? We're looking at how you can make people engage with a new space more easily. Transformation of physical space causes a lot of issues. People don't know where to go. And if you're mobile, then maybe that's okay. But if you're somebody in a wheelchair and you spend a kilometre going down a path that suddenly turns out to be blocked, that's a serious accessibility problem. So how can we shape and transform the way that we think about mobility? So we're doing a number of projects in that area. We're working very strongly with some councils, so the City of Prospect and City of Playford, as well as some City of Port Adelaide Enfield, and of course the Adelaide City Council, to look at things that they can be doing to immediately make people's lives better. And one of the bigger projects we're on at the moment is looking at park usage. And it's the Connected Parks project, which is supported by federal funding and is an amalgamation of 5 councils working together. And they had the question of how are their parks actually being used. Now, parks are full of play equipment and they're full of children. And the moment you make an area full of children, the solution cannot be point cameras at them. That's an immediate no-no. So the group that are working with this under Dr. Damath Ranasinghe, he did some original research in this area to work out how you can measure people in a park without sticking cameras at them. And park boundaries are actually really what we call porous. You can come in from almost anywhere. So if you're coming in from almost anywhere, how can we measure and get an idea of how many people are there? Why does this matter? Because if you're not looking after the park, people won't use it. But if you're looking after a park that's not being used, then you're spending water, you're spending fertiliser, and of course staff hours when you could be doing it elsewhere. But what about the play equipment? And one of the things that is happening is putting detectors onto the play equipment, again, not camera-based, so that if a swing set isn't being used, instead of somebody having to go out every week to go and check on it or every day, you can basically look and go, that swing set hasn't been used for 2 days. I wonder what it is. And go out and find that maybe the seats have been broken or something like that. So you're not looking to get rid of the important roles of parks. You're looking to get enough information to work out how to look after your parks, how to make the best use of the staff that you've got, because let's face it, nobody has too much money at the moment for maintenance, so it's a matter of concentrating your resources. And that's a really interesting project that's going to be of benefit across a very large area of South Australia, because as we head into summer, what it means is the parks that everybody wants to use to get out, to experience the outside, the play equipment should be better looked after. It should be able to meet the requirement for the number of people who are actually there. But there's the other question, which is if a park isn't being used, council will know about it. And they might be able to do something about it because there might be a good reason and it's something they can fix. Humans are relatively predictable. We'll only complain if we see it. Yeah. We're very bad at saying, oh, that was great. We're great at complaining. But if everyone stopped going somewhere, you're not going to get any complaints. And that's where measurement starts to become really handy.
So with your work, I'm really curious to find out the importance of collaboration and, how important is it for you to have, city and government and university and business working together on these solutions?
Oh, it's absolutely essential. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is solving a problem that doesn't exist because you've thought it into being. And it's the people who are having the problems who are the best people to talk about it. So the ratepayers, the residents, we'll talk to council, the people who are walking around experiencing it, They will actually be the ones who will be able to give you a really good insight. And then you look at state government, who've got this massive oversight as to what's going on. They can do things like measure throughput of traffic and things like that. They will give you the use cases. Industry will be able to give you the equipment and the software and the project management to an extent in order to achieve your solutions. But the great thing about the universities is we're dedicated to the creation, storage, the maintenance of knowledge. So looking through the ideas, being a neutral third party, we're not political, we don't have to be voted in or voted out, we're not selling a particular piece of technology. We have the opportunity to have a look at it, treat it as a research problem. If it's been solved, then we can go, look, that problem's actually been solved. Here are a range of things, and then somebody goes off and does a tender. But if it hasn't been solved, then we have the opportunity to engage students and researchers alike in coming up with a solution. The South Australian economy is transforming. Most of our manufacturing has changed, and we're a lovely. I love living in Adelaide, my favourite place in the world, but we're a long way from anywhere. Speaking as someone who has to travel a bit, and that means that transport costs can be quite high. But if we're sending ideas and software and plans and processes out to the rest of the world, that's an incredible way to generate economic development in the state. It's a great way to attract people to the state. And that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about Hybrid World, because it's saying actually South Australia is full of opportunity. It's full of spaces you won't find anywhere else in the world. We've got a number of universities training a very highly skilled workforce on a good educational basis. Come and have a look, because we really want to maintain ourselves, as South Australia. We're hungry to look at new ways of doing things, and you can develop it here, you can design it here, and then you can send it out to wherever it might be manufactured, or you can do some of that here and ship it locally. It's a great opportunity.
So tell us about Hybrid World. You obviously involved this year, and tell us what you're going to be sharing, and well, not all of it, of course, but just perhaps touch on what you're going to be doing.
The topic that I'm actually talking about this year is, what does smart mean for human habitation? And I may have actually given away a reasonable amount of my talk in this, because ultimately I'm going to stress the point that it's not just about the technology. It's really easy to fall back to technology, but it's about meeting the requirements of people. How do people live together now, and how they're going to live together in the future? Right now, for those who aren't here, we're meeting in my office, and my office is on level 4 of a 7-storey building, and we're meeting in my office because that's where I work. When the autonomous vehicle comes along, what I could have done is actually picked you up in the car, we hook into the high-speed network, we do the whole interview in the car, and at the end, I drop where I need to go to do whatever I'm doing, and you go to wherever you need to go. So the autonomous vehicle as a transformative workspace, suddenly you go, hang on, why is everybody still going to the office? Now, of course, collaboration is essential, working with people is vital. There will still be requirements to meet. But how we do this is going to change. And the same for human habitation. We form cities for a number of really good reasons. So the concentration, the economics, the access to resources, proximity of water, all of the reasons that we've been building cities for 10,000 years. What happens when we can make that work anywhere? What happens when energy comes from the plant on your own house and you're not connected to the grid at all? What happens when your waste management is a locally powered biodigester that does all of your waste management for you? You're not connected to a common sewerage line anymore. Water, still going to be the tricky problem, but at a point where water becomes the only thing you're connected to, it changes the way that we think about cities. And we do know that density is not our friend. A number of cities have gone through radical and rapid growth, and they're struggling with the density. They're struggling with moving all those people around. So we need to look at how the approaches that we're taking are going to change all of our assumptions. The whole 9 to 5 thing, the only reason we have rush hours is because people start work at roughly this time and they finish at roughly that time. It's utterly artificial. A very large number of people working in Australia at the moment are in fact working in the international context. but people expect them to be working 9 to 5, so they start at very early to meet one set of time zones, or they finish late to meet another. Looking at how we are going to change once we don't have those sort of lockstep synchronization points is going to be really interesting. And I guess what I wanted to really talk about is what we are going to do, how the sensing, how the measurement is going to make a really significant change to how we experience the city. It's going to challenge a lot of assumptions. And everybody thinks that we do certain things, and then you go and measure it, and it turns out that we don't. But I often describe that there are 3 things I get when I ask people. Because I talk to people, I ask them questions, and if I ask them a question, they're going to give me one of 3 answers. They're going to tell me what they believe to be the truth. Whether it is or whether it isn't, this is what they believe to be the truth. If we're in a position of power, if I'm in a position of power to them, or it's an embarrassing question, they'll tell me what I think they want to hear or what's socially acceptable. And option 3 is they'll just lie. So, and this is with the best will in the world, because this is perceptual, this is representing the structural information, and this is sometimes representing just people. Whereas if I combine what people tell me with what I'm sensing from the city, then I'll actually really understand what is going on, and then I can solve the right problem. And I come back to that point that we raised at the very start, which is working out what the right problem is and then solving it. Because if everybody tells me that this is the thing that's wrong and I fix it, and it wasn't, their lives don't get any better, and all I've done is been one of those people who's wasted large amounts of public money. I spent all this ratepayers' money on blah and it didn't fix anything. You survey enough people in a wide enough survey, you will gain a very large number of contradictory points. And how do you make people happy? You work out what it is that will actually make them happy, and then you do it. And whether they believe you or not, they will actually be happier.
Yeah. So with Hybrid World, obviously this event is just something extremely extraordinary, not just for South Australia, but on a national and even an international stage. What is exciting you about the program for this year?
The sheer breadth. So many fascinating people coming in to talk across such a range of issues. People who have succeeded at convincing other people that this is an idea worth pursuing, because every serious form of change starts with the belief that change is possible. I'm a great believer in a concept called design fiction, where you step to a point where you've solved the key problems, you're in the new world. You're actually here, and then you can talk about the solutions that you've gone through. The reason being, it removes the immediate obstacle of, that will never work. You have to start from belief. Change is difficult. Change can be unpleasant. Many people want to change, but they're scared of change. So the great thing I think for Hybrid World is you will see a lot of people who have made change happen, but they haven't done it in a short-term or aggressive way. They've done it through working with people. They've done it through collaboration. They've done it through socializing the ideas. They've done it through working out what people need in order to be comfortable to make that change. And it's not about pandering, and it's certainly not about lying to people. It's about finding the best truth. And it's a little bit of a weaselly way of saying it, but I stand by it, because I can tell you something in many different ways, but if I can work out the way to tell you something that is true, but in a way that you can accept it as true and then move forward, we stand a much better chance of making change. And change is coming. Transformation of the world, the autonomous vehicle, the reduction in the workforce. We are moving towards a point that we have never seen, where people will not actually need to do a huge range of jobs, and yet all those people will still be here, will still need to be fed and looked after, and they still need to, and they should be, an important part of society. Every time we hit large amounts of unemployment, it never ends well. You can go back to the French Revolution and the secondary revolution, where the textile workers were put out of work through a decline in the requirement for textile workers. Massive problems. So whenever we look at change and transformation, for me, one of the reasons to not focus on the technological, but to use it as a solution vector rather than being the core focus, is it requires you to think about people. The Indian Minister for Transport made an announcement in the last year saying, well, we're not going to have widespread adoption of the autonomous vehicle because we can't afford that level of unemployment. I mean, they were talking 12 million people being potentially unemployed overnight in primary roles inside driving. And you look at the contribution of the labour force in India, and they're immediately going, well, what are we going to do? So in hybrid world, you've got people who are thinking about the difficult problems. You know, we've done a number of simple transformations. The typewriter became the word processor, became email. It's really impressive. The technology is impressive, but we didn't change the office. Office hours stayed the same throughout that. We just work outside of them. And it's that next stage of transformation. It's saying, well, hang on, we can do this. So what does that actually mean? What does that change look like? Can we run a distributed office around the world effectively with the approaches that we've got and still be just as productive?
Yeah. I mean, it's just an incredible event because bringing all these minds together, you know, you can just imagine the stuff that if you put them all in a room for a couple of days and just shut the door, go for it, what would come as a result of that would just be absolutely astounding. And I think a lot of people, you know, especially the sort of the middle-aged, elderly kind of people are quite afraid of the technological changes that are coming. But I mean, I'm sort of at a stage in my life where I can just see the opportunity that's going to come as a result of the tech changing. And, you know, I remember when I was a kid growing up with the Jensens, you know, that had the flying cars and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, they're just around the corner. And the future generations ahead of us are just going to be living in this super exciting time. And look, just even going through the whole journey of business that I have, you know, I never ever believed things were impossible, but even more so now, nothing is impossible to do because of what is available to us and the minds that are out there that have the ability to actually shape these things that people think about. And I think that's probably what excites me so much about Hybrid World as well. And I mean, is there anyone in particular in Hybrid World that you're really looking forward to connecting with?
I'll be going to talk to everybody. I'm actually taking 2 whole days to go and hang out at Hybrid World, apart from my own talk, which is actually unheard of for my calendar because when I went last year, I was not able to go to all of it, and I felt I was missing out. It'd be great to catch up with Robert Tersick. I find him really inspiring. I love listening to Robert. I mean, to be honest, I want to go and listen to everybody. I realise that's not helpful for people listening to this. You know, my dulcet tones will be pretty much the same. I'll cover more context and more detail, but honestly, if you put 2 days aside, I think you'll come out inspired. You will be thinking, you will meet so many people, and some of the connections that I've made through it have just been astounding. The accidental collisions you have with people that you didn't know you needed to know, that is how I do my job. I've been the director of Smart Cities for 18 months, and I can't talk about it at the moment. We're on the edge of some pretty amazing things that we did not see when we put this together 18 months ago. And it's because we have been meeting people and working with them and determining how we can work together. I'm optimistic about our future because I think that when people work together, that we can generate solutions. I think there's a matter of focus and consideration that we're sometimes not as good at. For me, for example, a smart city works for everybody, and that means things like the Don Dunstan Foundation Zero Homelessness Project is absolutely essential because you cannot have a good city running on top of a group of people who are basically being left behind. It just won't work. And so there are big aspects of inclusion that I think are fantastic coming in with all of this. But again, all of these discussions, when I talk to people, I find so many people have ideas and we just need to connect them. So you've got technologists who want to be able to talk about a certain issue, but maybe they're missing something about architecture. You've got architects who are fantastic philosophers of three-dimensional space, but perhaps aren't experts in the Internet of Things. You've got all these people who want to be able to work together because our society would not actually have emerged if the vast majority of people couldn't work together constructively. End of story. Yeah. So, put aside all the things that we're seeing because there are many terrible things going on. There are many people who need help and assistance. But overall, if we actually focus on this and work together, I'm actually pretty positive that we can fix it. We're working out with ASEAN at the moment, and we're working with a number of nations who are sort of moving from developing to developed, who want to reconstruct cities that have been ravaged by war and colonization. And some of these cities are thousands of years old, but 100 years ago went through a major reset, and they're trying to rebuild them. But these cities in the ASEAN nations are basically looking at Singapore and going, well, can we be Singapore? And our answer to them is, well, actually, we think that you can. You can provide all those services, all the security, education, safety, and support. And we think we can do that. But we will only do it by working together, and we'll only do it by having a genuine understanding of what the actual problems are. There's nothing worse than sitting there and solving somebody else's problem when it's not one that they have. Yeah. So that's the great thing about Hybrid World for me, because it brings together a whole lot of people who've actually bothered to sit down, work out what the problem is, and try to solve it. And they've all done it in a different way, and they've all learnt from their failures. Because I guarantee everybody who stands up to talk at Hybrid World has had something go wrong, and has had to think around it and learn and work out how to go forward. So come along to everything. Take the 2 days, immerse yourself, take a lot of notes, take a lot of cards, and just see what happens.
Well, Nick, I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat today, and look, I really appreciate your time fitting us into your busy schedule prior to Hybrid World. I'm sure it's going to be mad for you. But thanks so much for joining us on the In Show.
Absolute pleasure. I look forward to catching up with everyone later. Thanks.
That's Director of the Australian Smart Cities Consortium, Nick Faulkner, speaking to David on the In Show, and he'll be at Hybrid World Adelaide, July 20 to 24 at the Adelaide Convention Centre.
Yeah, he sure will, and along with many, many others. And look, the thing with Hybrid World is it's all about families. You know, if you've got a child that's interested in coding and, robotics and, drone flying and things like that, it's just a place to be.
Yeah, from virtual reality to augmented reality and everything in between, it's all there in one place. See the future now at Hybrid World Adelaide.
The In Show. Subscribe to the In Show podcast on iTunes. Presented by David Grice and Troy Sincock. Music by Zach Grice. A Dave and the Beanstalk production.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.